I'm picking back up on chapter 27, wood hauling. I'll start at the top of the page. Father was coming back with a load, and he knew that an empty sled must always give the road to the loaded sled. So he cracked the whip and shouted, "Gee!" Star and Bright swerved to the right. Before Almanzo could even yell, they were sinking deep in the snow in the ditch. They did not know how to break road like big oxen. They snorted and floundered and plunged, and the sled was sinking under the snow. The little steers tried to turn around, and the yoke twisted, almost choking them. Almanzo struggled in the snow, too, trying to reach the yearlings' heads. Father turned and watched while he went by. Then he faced forward and drove on toward home. Almanzo got a hold of Star's head and spoke to him gently. Pierre and Louis had hold of Bright, and the yearlings stopped plunging. Only their heads and their backs showed above the snow. Almanzo swore. "Oh!" And they had to dig out the steers and the sled. They had no shovel. They had to move all that snow with their hands and feet. There was nothing else they could do. It took a long time, but they kicked and pawed all the snow away from in front of the sled and the steers, and they tramped it hard and smoothed in front of the runners. Almanzo straightened the tongue and the chain and the yoke. He had to sit down and rest a minute, but he got up and he petted Star and Bright and spoke to them encouragingly. He took an apple away from Pierre and broke it in two and gave it to the two little steers. When they had eaten it, he cracked his whip and cheerfully shouted, "Giddy up!" Pierre and Louis pushed the sled with all their might, and the sled started. Almanzo shouted and cracked his whip. Star and Bright hunched their backs and pulled. Up they went out of the ditch, and up went the sled with a lurch. That was one trouble Almanzo had got out of all by himself. The road in the woods was fairly well broken now, and this time Almanzo did not put so many logs on the sled, so he rode homeward on the load with Pierre and Louis sitting behind him. Down the long road he saw Father coming, and he said to himself that this time Father must turn out to let him go by. Star and Bright walked briskly, and the sled was sliding easily down the white road. Almanzo's whip cracked loudly in the frosty air. Nearer and nearer came Father's big oxen, and Father riding on the big sled. And now, of course, the big oxen should have made way for Almanzo's load, but perhaps Star and Bright remembered that they had turned out before, or perhaps they knew they must be polite to older, bigger oxen. Nobody expected them to turn out of the road, but suddenly they did. One sled runner dropped into the soft snow, and over went the sled, and the load and the boys topsy-turvy, pell-mell. Almanzo went sprawling through the air, head first into the snow. He wallowed and scrambled and came up. His sled stood on edge. The logs were scattered and upended in the drifts. There was a pile of red-brown legs and sides deep in the snow. Father's big oxen were going calmly by. Pierre and Louis rose out of the snow, swearing in French, and Father stopped his oxen and got off his sled. "Well, well, well, son," he said, "seems we've met again." Almanzo and Father looked at the yearlings. Bright lay on Star. Their legs and the chain and the tongue was all mixed up, and the yoke was over Star's ears, and the yearlings lay still, too sensible to try and move. Father helped untangle them and get them on their feet. They were not hurt. Father helped set Almanzo's sled on its runners with its sled stakes for skids and Almanzo's sled stakes for poles. And he loaded the logs again. Then he stood back and said nothing while Almanzo yoked up Star and Bright and petted them and encouraged them and made them haul the tilted load along the edge of the ditch and safely to the road. "That's the way, son," Father said. "Down again, up again." He drove on to the timber, and Almanzo drove on to the wood pile at home. All that week and all the next week he went on hauling from the timber. He was learning to be a pretty good ox driver and a wood hauler. Every day his foot ached a little less, and at last he hardly limped at all. He helped Father haul a huge pile of logs, ready to be sawed and split and corded in the woodshed. Then one evening Father said that they had hauled that year's supply of wood, and Mother said it was high time Almanzo went to school, if he was going to get any schooling that winter. Almanzo said there was threshing to do, and the young calves needed breaking, and he asked, "What do I have to go to school for? I can read and write and spell, and I don't want to be a school teacher or storekeeper. You can read and write and spell, Father said slowly, but can you figure? Yes, Father, said Almanzo. Yes, I can figure some. A farmer must know more figuring than that, son. You better go to school. Almanzo did not say any more. He knew it would be no use. Next morning he took his dinner pail and he went to school. This year his seat was farther back in the room, so he had a desk for his books and slate, and he studied hard to learn the whole arithmetic, because the sooner he knew it all, the sooner he would not have to go to school any more.